Hello and welcome to the second part of my lucid dreaming video lecture. Some fellow students and teachers have been asking me for applications of lucid dreaming for students. And I've been thinking about measures that use lucid dreaming to write better exams and have a better exam experience. And at first, I will cover the preparation for the exam, the studying part, and how you can use lucid dreaming to improve your studying experience and study more efficiently. Second, I will explain measures that help you to get into a positive mental and emotional state that makes it easier for you to perform well in the exam. Third, I'll talk about how you can reflect about the exam once the exam is over. Maybe your exam experience has been good, maybe it has been bad. Either way, the tools I provide can help you to re-evaluate your exam experience. Maybe consider it from a more objective point of view, which can help you dealing with possible anxiety, as well as finding positive connotation to a potentially negative experience. And part 4 is about nightmares in which you write an exam. And I'm going to explain how you can convert these nightmares into something positive. Again, the questions and answers will be in the comments. So if you have any questions, please ask them in the comments below and I'm going to answer them. Let us start with the first step, namely the exam preparation. I divided the exam preparation stage into several steps you can see here. And at first I recommend to use autosuggestion, just like in the induction of lucid dreaming, when you try to get a lucid dream and use autosuggestion, like positive mantras with visualizations to increase the likelihood of success. You can use the same in the exam preparation. So when you use autosuggestion, you're not going to be dreaming, you're going to be awake. And a possible autosuggestion for exam preparation would be like, I score in the top 5 of my class regarding the exam grades. This would be something you can use to boost your motivation and your self-esteem and mentally prepare you for your success. Second, I recommend to mechanize, or you could call it automatize, the reading and the research process. So as a university student, you frequently have to read through lots and lots of sources. Sometimes it is impossible to read everything very carefully, and you just have to quickly read over the most important sections while skipping most parts, because there's just so much material that it is impossible to cover everything extremely attentively. So what I do to put myself into the mood of studying like this, studying without paying attention to the learnings, but rather the mechanical aspects of studying, namely the reading and the research I'm doing, is I basically, in a lucid dream, I create a scene in which I see myself sitting inside a library full of books related to the topic I want to study. And this persona of mine, this projection of mine, is going to be reading very productively and in a very focused manner. And by basically creating an artificial mirror inside the dream in which I can see myself being productive, I put myself into the mood of mirroring this productivity in real life when I wake up. So that's part of a like mental or emotional aspect to exam preparation. And thirdly, I highly recommend the creation of mnemonics and their visualization. So here I provide some examples for what I consider good mnemonics. This French cafe You probably know the picture from Van Gogh. I connect this with the French Revolution because it's a French cafe, right? And the French Revolution date is 1789. And I remember this date by imagining this cafe, and in there is one aristocrat and 7, 8, or 9 peasants discussing hunting rights, and it's very emotional. And the idea is that in a dream I can very physically, very vividly experience this setting. And there's going to be noise in this cafe, the people are talking, there's going to be the smell of coffee, there's going to be a distinct atmosphere. I can connect with the mnemonic. So you can see that this array of numbers is of course connected to the year. So you just have to memorize this setting with a 7, 8, or 9 peasants discussing with one aristocrat, and you automatically connect it with the year of the French Revolution. That's the idea. And lucid dreams make this way more vivid. So I'm sure that I will never forget the date of the French Revolution in my entire life, thanks to lucid dreaming and imagining this in a dream. The next example for a mnemonic is this Yugoslavian sawmill. So in economics of the firm literature, I learned that the Yugoslavian post-World War II sawmills are an example for employee firm ownership systems. The most productive employees were rewarded the most firm shares, and of course this is going to be an over-proportional reward system. So the higher your performance is, the more firm shares you get, but of course the performance you are going to exert is also going to increase the value of each firm share, right? So this at this time and in this place, this has been a revolutionary system for employee-owned firms, and that's often quoted in the context of ownership models in economics of the firm literature. And the way I remember this is basically from sawmill, I split the word into two, and from saw I arrive at sow, when you sow plants, and the harvest part is related to the mill, because after you have harvested some crop, you are going to carry it to the mill, right? So, and the idea with this sowing and harvesting is that the sowing represents the effort the employees are exerting, and the harvesting is going to be their payment in firm ownership shares, right? So that's also something I can think of in the waking world, and then I can project myself into this lumber mill and observe the atmosphere and form my associations and form an emotional connection to the learnings. And this is how I remember it for a lifetime, because you may think that a post-World War II Yugoslavian sawmill is not extremely relevant most of the time, but it's going to be relevant in economics class when the topic is ownership structures and ownership models, right? So this example is always at the ready for me, because I have this connection. And finding the mnemonic hasn't been too difficult. It's kind of just the connection you need to see between the saw and the sow, and the mill and the harvest, and the rest is going to be more or less automatic. But what really makes it memorable is its application inside the lucid dream, when you can enter this place yourself and see it with your own eyes. You can feel it, you can smell it, you can touch it, and that's what makes it different, right? And it doesn't really cost time, because if you are going to have a lucid dream anyways, then you can as well use it for something related to your studies and benefit from it, right? And if you don't have a lucid dream at all, then you are basically just wasting your dream time, your sleep time, on like something you possibly won't even remember. So you can see how useful lucid dreaming can be for reinforcing mnemonics to memorize study contents. And the third example for a good mnemonic is like Haribo, the candy firm. And I connect Haribo with idiosyncratic machines, because there has been an author called Williamson, and he has talked about something he calls ex post opportunistic appropriation of quasi-rents, which is like impossible to remember, right? It sounds terrible, like also from an economics class. But this mnemonic is going to make it easy for us, because idiosyncratic means it is a product that is like so specialized that not any firm can benefit from its productive factors. So meaning if Haribo needs a candy sorting machine, then the provider of this candy sorting machine, who is going to sell it to Haribo, is in a difficult situation, because Haribo can say, well, I'm not going to pay the agreed upon price for the machine you are providing for me. Instead, I am going to pay less. And the supplier doesn't really have a choice, because like he cannot just sell his gold bear like sorting machine to a firm that isn't Haribo, right? Nobody will buy it. And that's how like a quasi-rent happens, right? So this is like the like academic context of this topic, right? And now the mnemonic. Haribo is of course like an acronym, but I'm going to give it a different meaning here. And the HA is going to be has. The R is going to be really. The I is going to be idiosyncratic, and here you can already see the connection to like the concept of the quasi-rent, because an idiosyncratic machine is going to be needed to sort the candy, right? And the billing opportunities refer to the opportunity to opportunistic, and the billing to the appropriation of quasi-rents. And the billing has a second nice synergy, because it helps me to memorize the name of the researcher. Because, you know, William and Bill, that's kind of the same name, right? So I just have to memorize the son. But after reading a couple of papers by Williamson, it's not a problem to memorize that this guy's last name is Williamson and not William. So from Bill, I can derive the William. And like finding this mnemonic has taken maybe 10 minutes. Not too difficult, right? And inside a dream, you can like fill it with life and actually experience it yourself. So generally, when you're trying to build mnemonics, it is good to keep them in the form of speech, sound, colors, pictograms, or these scenes, such as the cafe or the sawmill, right? When you use written words inside the dream, that's going to be difficult, because you already learned that looking at written text multiple times can be a reality check, because the letters are going to change their shape or something comparable. This is because it is quite difficult for the brain to create text inside a dream and at the same time perceive the text and read it. Because again, the brain is both the creator of the dream world as well as the audience that perceives the dream world. And especially creating text is quite difficult and requires some computational power the brain doesn't have without making mistakes. And that's why text is not optimal inside dreams for like forming mnemonics. But like the word Haribo, I guess that's short enough to like not cause any issues inside a dream, and the rest you can just memorize via speech instead of writing, right? So just try to remember the words inside the dream and experience this whole process. Like, put yourself into the perspective of Haribo, which may, like, let's say you are the opportunistic manager who is going to buy the machine from the supplier, and you're thinking of like how to appropriate a quasi-rent, and you just experience this whole example yourself. Of course, I'm not like trying to trash talk Haribo. This is just convenient that it works this way. So nothing bad intended here, but yeah, you get the idea, right? So the lucid dream is going to actually make this connection vivid, and you can like memorize your study contents using the lucid dream. And as soon as you have some of these mnemonics, the next step is going to be to organize them. And this is why I provided this picture of the palace, because like some psychologists recommend that you can organize your visualizations and your mnemonics inside what they call a memory palace or a thought palace. And the idea is that you design the palace yourself, the architecture, inside your imagination. And people with a vivid imagination can do it in the waking state, but I personally don't have the most vivid imagination, which is why I do it in my lucid dreams, where I can just cling to some key elements and the rest of the dream is going to form itself, and the palace more or less creates itself. The brain like automatically fills in the gaps of your imagination. And in this palace I have, like in front of it, there is my French cafe, which has the French Revolution thing. In the area around it, there's my Yugoslavian sawmill, and inside the cafe there's this machine that sorts these candies, right? And I can imagine in the waking state that I walk through this palace I have designed and decided the layout upon inside my dream, and I can simply at any given time walk inside like a certain floor or a certain hallway of this palace, and like summon the mental images that are going to help me to memorize my study contents. And this is how you can do it as well. And as soon as you have used mnemonics multiple times and organized them multiple times inside this palace, and you have some structure inside your head, then it comes down to, like, again, mechanizing or automatizing the answering process of exam questions. So some things are just reoccurring, such as in any human resources or personal economics class, they are probably going to ask you about the definition of human resource management. And I would use my mnemonic for human resource management, and before the exam, like several weeks before the exam, I would start just writing it down on a paper inside the dream. And of course, I have the problem that the text may change inside the dream, because that's just how dreams work. But what matters here is the mechanical aspect of writing it down, not that the text doesn't change shape after I like look away and look at it again. So you're going to like simply practice it inside the dream, where it's relatively painless. Like, you can do it many times and your hand will never hurt, because like it's your dream, right? If your hand starts hurting from writing too much, you can just heal it. And this is how you can like mechanize the process of answering the most common questions, and you're going to save time in the exam. And I found that especially like changing the scenery inside the dream, for example, from the cafe to the sawmill and to the candy sorting machine, these are quite far apart in the dream. Like, they are not directly connected, like French Revolution and the sawmill, for example, is not directly connected. So inside my palace area, they are going to be in different places. And how can I like teleport from one place to the next without like walking all the way inside the dream? And there's a trick proposed by Stephen LaBerge, the author of Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming, and that's called the spinning trick. And basically, you can use it for two purposes. One is you can move in between scenes inside a dream and just change the environment in which you are. And you do it by closing your eyes and rotating around your own axis, like you just spin around your own axis, right? And when you open your eyes again, you can see, if you focus on some salient details, the rest of the scenery will form. So, for example, if I try to get from the palace to the sawmill, I imagine the saw, like the rotating round saw, and this is the first thing I imagine after closing my eyes and spinning. And when I open my eyes again, I can see the saw, and the rest of the scenery is forming inside the lucid dream. This is how it works. And the second application of this spinning trick is that you can make unstable dreams stable again. So sometimes you notice that you're about to wake up, or like the dream starts blurring, something becomes unclear, or stuff starts shaking, or there's like strange noise that may come from the outside world. And you can, at least for a while, prolong the dream by performing the spinning trick. And this is how you keep dreaming for a bit before waking up finally. If you weren't about to wake up, but the dream just becomes unstable because of other disturbing factors, then you can bridge this time by spinning. And if you're going to wake up, you can at least sleep for a bit longer and dream for a bit longer using the spinning trick. So quite useful knowledge, I guess. So now let's move on to chapter 2, namely the things you do a couple of nights before the exam to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally to perform at the best of your abilities inside the exam. Again, use autosuggestion. We already saw an example for that before, but it's important that you do it, right? And you repeat it, you visualize it, and you need to stick to the rules of autosuggestion, which I provided in the first part of the video. So find your autosuggestion, repeat it, and visualize it. And what I also found you can do is, if you feel afraid of the exam, it helps to personify your anxiety into some let's say a fictional being, or maybe a person. The choice is yours pretty much. And the idea is that you start to fight this being you create from your fear, and by giving your fear a face, you at first qualify it. It doesn't become so omnipresent and dangerous. It is restricted to one entity. And inside your dream, this entity becomes defeatable, because it's a lucid dream, you are in control, and you can decide that you want to defeat this entity and have an epic battle against your anxiety, so to say. And this is mainly for experienced dreamers whose risk of failing or waking up is relatively low, because if you happen to lose control over your dream, it could be that the nightmare, or that the personification of your anxiety takes over, and the dream, which would have been a training scenario otherwise, becomes a nightmare. And that's of course something you would try to prevent. You could also be so emotional inside the dream, or interact with the dream world so much that it becomes difficult to keep the dream stable. This is why this is a tip rather for experienced dreamers. And another difficulty with this idea is that you have to find an accurate personalization for your exam-related anxiety. So at first, when I experimented with this idea, I tried to just project a fictional being such as the Grim Reaper, but the problem is that my brain wouldn't make the connection between the Grim Reaper and an exam, because the two don't have anything in common, right? So I don't want to fight my general fear of whatever life and death, but I want to fight my exam-related fear, and that's why there has to be some connection. I was thinking about maybe using the lecturer, the professor, the teacher, for this entity, simply projecting them into the dream and fighting against them. But that's not adequate, because usually you are afraid of the exam and not the person. And I guess even if you're afraid of the person, it may be a bit awkward to face the person in real life after projecting it into a dream several times. So I don't recommend taking your teacher or your professor. You can instead find inspiration in surrealist arts and use some symbolism which your brain understands. And for me, this is I basically took the aspects I connect to exams, and I try to create the being from these exam-related aspects. And one thing I always connect with exams are peppermint candies, because that's what I usually eat while I'm taking the exam, and that's why my exam monster, so to say, lives inside a swamp that smells like peppermint. And there is a lot of mist, which represents my uncertainty, because I never know exactly which exam questions are going to be asked, and this mist is representing the general feeling of uncertainty. And there are also some geysers, which are probably connected to my water bottle, which I always bring to my exams. And the exact shape of my exam monster is a bit like this picture. It is basically a DNA human spider, and the spider consists of several examiners, which work at EBS and patrol through the exam hall while we are writing the exams. That's just how I can include the element of these examiners into my exam monster, because it's also an aspect of the exam monster, aspect of the exam anxiety. And this exam spider has a web that consists of lots of pens glued together, the pens I'm using to write. And inside the dream, these pens, the web of pens, makes it quite difficult to step on the ground. So usually when I'm battling my exam monster, I'm flying in the stream. So it may help that depending on how your exact exam monster is going to look like, you may want to be able to fly in lucid dreams as well, which is something you can teach yourself simply by practicing it. And this exam monster for me shoots paper, which flies and cuts through the air, and also through the flesh if I get hit, right? And it hurts actually in the dream. The way I defeat this monster is by flying and burning it and shocking it with some kind of magic. I can do it because it's my dream, and everything I can imagine is also what I can make happen inside the dream, if I have the faith in it. So I use this as a visualization of battling my exam-related anxiety. And as long as you find you construct a surrealist being that is going to represent your exam anxiety from the elements you usually connect with exams, then you can battle it as well, right? What also helps me is to use lucid dreams to recall and essentially replay situations of accomplishments, situations where I became encouraged by somebody or comforted. And these good memories are going to put me in the mood that overshadows my anxiety. That is probably easier to do and requires less preparation than the design of your personal exam monster, but it can also help you very much to overcome exam-related anxiety. And a last tip about the time before the exam: you should avoid wake-induced lucid dreaming and substance-induced lucid dreaming in the night before the exam. I guess substance-induced lucid dream is quite self-explanatory. Like if you take Kalia, then it's likely that you have a very restless night, where you wake up frequently and maybe also sweat. If you can't handle the taste, then you're going to feel ill. So you should definitely not do it in the night before the exam. And wake-induced lucid dreaming can also be risky, because I already mentioned that if you start interacting with your wake-induced lucid dream too quickly, then it may collapse before you actually enter it. And you have to start all over again. And this can ruin your night's sleep as well. So you should avoid these two methods at the night before the exam, and just hope that your dream-induced lucid dream technique is refined enough to give you a lucid dream in the night before the exam if you want one. But it can also be an option to simply have no lucid dream in the night before the exam, but several nights before it. Like the good mood from a positive lucid dream, such as in your personal holiday paradise or something, it can carry on to across multiple days and not just one night. Here I'm going to present some measures you can take after the exam is over. And what I usually start with is a recreation of the exam scene from my memory inside the dream. And it may be difficult for inexperienced dreamers to accomplish something like that. But again, the tip here is that you focus on the most prominent features you remember, and your mind is going to fill in the gaps. And even if your mind doesn't do it as accurately as it would if you consciously filled in the details, it's still going to work if you lack imagination like me. And you can also control time inside the dream, at least your perception of time. And you can freeze the time until everything is in place and the scenery becomes authentic to you. And I recommend to get a more objective perspective on the exam, and you do it by reframing it. I guess the inspiration here comes from neuro-linguistic programming, which is a constructivist application to essentially reframe the context of an experience and make it happier, or simply make it more objective and less painful. And some ways you can do it is by simply replaying the scene from your memories inside the dream, but you change it to black and white or to grayscale instead of the colors you saw in the memory. Or you could flip the entire picture on its head, or you could mute all sound. And these modifications aren't too difficult, even if you're new to lucid dreaming. That's something you can easily do in a dream. And this is just going to qualify the experience and make it less painful to you. So let's say you had a bad exam and you're undertaking these measures to develop some distance to your experience. And the reason you would try to get a more objective perspective on the exam is because it allows you to identify the aspects about it which scare you, and you can address them. So here are some examples of problems I have identified through lucid dreaming, which I have with exams. And I also provide the solution I found. So one aspect that has always been distracting me inside exams, which I wasn't aware of until I analyzed it in lucid dreams, were that the examiners are patrolling around the hallway inside the exam classroom. And even though I'm not cheating, it feels strange to be observed by them carefully, right? So this is something that sometimes confuses me inside the exam and distracts me. So what I do is if I feel that it could be a problem in the upcoming exam, I go to the examiners before the exam, tell them to check my pockets for any cheating notes and so on. And after they found none, I asked them to not idle next to my desk while they are patrolling, because it makes me it distracts me, right? This is one of the things I do. And I guess I also have the problem that I frequently spend too much time on one question, and I get in a state of analysis paralysis, So I sit there and think about the question, think about how to answer it, how to structure my text, but I'm not actually writing or doing anything. So some questions also reward an underproportional number of points to the time you have to invest to solve it. Like some questions just work like this, right? They give 5 points, but they take 20 minutes to solve instead of 5 minutes to solve. And the trick is that you just try to find a pattern inside these questions and try to recognize them beforehand. And some of these questions are individually different. So sometimes there is a topic I know tons of details about, and I know myself well enough that I can tell beforehand whether I'm going to waste a lot of time on that question or whether I'm able to answer it concisely and only provide the exact answer the professor would like to read on my paper. And any question that looks like I would spend too much on it if I did it now, I just put to the end of the exam. And I mark it with such a paperclip at the end of a page. And this is how I can always go back to it, because the paperclip is going to stick out, at least the small metal part down here. And I can always go back to it later. And I will not forget to go back to a question I skipped, which is also an anxiety, source of anxiety I had in previous exams. And some instructors have recommended me to use text markers a lot. Like, let's say, a red text marker for abstract concepts, a blue text marker for examples that explain this concept, and let's say a green text marker for arguments the author is making, and perhaps a yellow text marker for counter-arguments. And I end up switching text markers while reading the text, and I can see that there is some anxiety related with overusing text markers. So the last 2 semesters, since I did this lucid dreaming project, I identified this marker problem I had and just got used to not having any markers. So when you see me reading a text, I will never ever use markers again, because I'd just spend too much time marking stuff instead of solving the questions. And so that I can focus on solving the problems, I simply take my normal pencil and mark some things I find important, but I never actually use colored text markers. So that's something I identified through lucid dreaming, and now I'm saving time and a lot of stress thanks to it. And I'm not sure what your exam-related anxiety sources are, but I encourage you to use lucid dreaming to find them, right? By getting a more objective perspective through context reframing, like changing the color, inverting the scene, and so on. And lastly, I recommend to derail the exam. Basically, let's say you had a negative exam experience, you analyzed it, you now know what scares you about it, so it's of no more use to you, this memory, right? You already extracted all the learnings you needed. And that is when you take this memory and change it into something entirely positive. And you can do it with anything silly you can think of. For example, you start to write inside the exam and you throw food at other people, and you start a food fight or a pillow fight maybe. Or you start dancing on tables. Or since you are the dreamer and in control of the dream world, you can also simply move the ceiling and you let it rain hamsters, right? So you can do anything pretty much to make this bad exam experience an entertaining one after extracting all the learnings you needed. So let's come to the last part of the presentation, namely exam-related nightmares. If you are anxious about exams, chances are that you are also going to experience your anxiety in nightmares. And that's why I decided to provide a short guideline on how to deal with exam nightmares, because exam nightmares are a bit idiosyncratic, here's the term again, so different compared to other nightmares. But some basic principles still apply. So the first step is to become lucid, and you watch out for dream signs, but these dream signs, there are some common dream signs, For me, this would be silver coins and red eyes and limping people, like my top 3, which can also happen in exam dreams. But there are different exam dream signs that aren't your common dream signs. And for me, this is often like nonsensical exam questions. It is not just that I don't know how to answer the question, or the question doesn't have anything to do with the subject of the exam, but it may not make any grammatical sense, or it uses like words that don't exist in the English language. And this is how, when I read a completely nonsensical exam question, I always ask myself, am I dreaming? How did I get here? And perform a passive reality check, so to say, as a reaction to a nonsensical exam question. So far, I haven't lost time in an actual exam because there was a nonsensical exam question in it and I performed a reality check. So it doesn't really happen in real life so much. But it is still good that you watch out for nonsensical exam questions in dreams, and after having a couple of exam nightmares and you see multiple nonsensical questions, you are going to start developing the habit to reality check from inside the dream. So not all habits have to be formed in the waking state. Some can be formed inside the dream. Then in dreams, I often have arguments with examiners. Like, they're accusing me of cheating even though I'm not somebody who cheats. And sometimes they just say that the time is up, even though I still have time. Or I check out the time and I still have 20 minutes, and 2 seconds later the time is up. And the examiners start arguing that I cannot write longer than the given time. So these are also indicators for me that I am inside a lucid dream instead of the waking state, because it doesn't usually happen in the waking state. And of course, I also pay attention to morphing text. This is actually like a common dream sign, right? Like, you look at text, you look away, and the text changes. Some letters change, some words change, the entire thing changes. This is something that tells you that you're dreaming, and you should always pay attention to text, because this is like something that really betrays a dream as a dream. And noise is also an important factor. Like, in an exam room, there is some noise, but not much noise. Like, there's no people talking, right? Or maybe just one examiner to another, or something like that in a corner far away. But it's not like it's going to have like the noise of, let's say, a soccer stadium or something, right? It's not loud. And in my dreams, the exams are often loud. Like, the students are talking to each other inside the exam and so on. And that's just, something that also reveals the dream as a dream. So maybe your exam-related dream signs are a bit different, but you should pay attention to them, note them down into your dream journal, and identify them so you can identify exam nightmares as they are happening. Then, if you realize that you're dreaming and you become lucid, the next step is to remain dreaming. Because again, if you basically get too excited about being in a lucid dream, be it due to negative or positive reasons. Like, sometimes I have been struggling, tormenting myself in a dream exam, and then I realized it was a dream, and I was so angry at the dream that I woke up. I changed my breath rhythm and I woke up. That's something I would like to avoid, because if I'm going to wake up in such a state, I'm usually stressed, and I have negative emotions in the moment of waking up. And this negative mood is going to be carried into the day. So I want to avoid this at all cost, which is why I try to keep breathing calmly, accept the fact that I am inside a lucid dream, and I start carefully interacting with the dream instead of screaming at the dream or going on a rampage inside the dream, right? So to avoid feeling tired and at bad when you wake up, you make sure not to react too emotionally to the fact that you're dreaming. And the last step is the preparation of your exit outside of the dream, or your conclusion of the dream. So the first step is that you need to get used to the particular atmosphere inside the dream, because every dream is different. They have a different feel to them, and I feel that if you change too much about the dream at once, you may get so excited because of your sudden mood swing that you wake up. So this is related to this aspect, careful interaction with the dream, right? You don't want to overdo it. So you get accustomed and you try to synchronize your own personal state of mind with the dream world that has its own atmosphere. And when the two are in a synchronization that you can do some careful changes, you slowly switch to large-scale changes. So what you could do after identifying an exam-related nightmare as an exam-related nightmare rather than a waking state exam nightmare is summoning the exam monster. So I would take my human spider and maybe how do I summon it? Well, there are different ways. Usually I try to modify either the ceiling or the floor of the exam room. And at first I fly, so I hover over the ground myself, and then I usually open the ground or the ceiling and let the exam monster appear. And then I have my usual battle against my anxiety persona. I defeat it, and I can wake up with a feeling of accomplishment. And if I don't feel like fighting and summoning the exam monster, I instead switch it to a different setting. And the way we do it, we already learned earlier, namely the spinning trick. So again, you close your eyes and you spin around your own axis. And you try to recall some prominent features of the setting you want to spawn in. And when your mental eye has these salient prominent features, such as the sawmill saw, or let's say the gold bear for the gold bear sorting machine, these things are in front of your imagination, your mental image. You can open your eyes, and the rest of the scene will assemble itself thanks to the brain filling the gaps that your imagination cannot. And such places you can spin into would be your personal favorite holiday place, or it could be a waterfall, and there you can meditate until you wake up, for example. Or for me, it would probably be underwater deep sea swimming and breathing underwater, because I really like doing it, and it makes me very happy. So that's something I can use to exit an exam nightmare. I simply change the scenery, so to say. And this is how I wake up with positive emotions. Either accomplishment from defeating the monster, or serenity from doing my underwater swim, or whatever it is you might be doing. So here's the reminder again. Please ask all your questions in the comments, and I'm going to answer them. And you don't have to focus on the exam-related application. If you want to ask questions you may have had during the last video, or maybe outside the video context about lucid dream, just ask them nonetheless, and I will provide answers to the best of my abilities. And here are my sources. Thank you very much for your attention.